Hey everybody, this is Kevin Breslin with another episode of What's Doing. You know, my father was very strange in life. He used to tell young people to come over to his house, bring your work, let me see it. Yeah, you're going to be a big writer. They'd come over with reams of paper and he'd tell me to hang around. And they'd stand there, my father be in his bedroom. He'd say, let me see that. He'd take the copy from the kids. There were high schoolers, young guys in college. They'd all come and they'd be all nervous. And I think to myself, wow, they're standing here. My father would glance at it and say, yeah, do this, do that. I realized he was just trying to help them, but he really wasn't paying any attention to them because he didn't extol like that much time reaching out to many young writers. And then I came across one of his stories where he said she's 32-year-old mother. She's got some boys at home. She writes a highly useful book called Women in Mitral Valve Prolapse, which is a heart ailment. She's written a few novels. She became a big person at the New York Post writing gossip, which was a very tricky position for this woman. We're here with Victoria Gotti today. Her father was a famous gangster in New York, John Gotti, whom my father knew, wrote about, and cared about, but he also cared about Victoria because he said she had a ton of talent. Victoria, were you surprised when he wrote this about you and said you were very talented?
Yeah, I was flattered because I knew who Jimmy Breslin, obviously was at the time, and I was very flattered. I was very flattered because I went up against a lot of adversity when I first came out in journalism, and everybody just thought, well, she's all the look of it, but she's certainly not going to deliver and whatever, but I did. And it caused, I think, jealousy amongst people, but I think I surprised a lot of people. And hearing it from your dad was quite a compliment. It was very flattering.
I know he said, look, her father's famous, although not as an archbishop, from purportedly respectable, famous families who will agree to sell out their parents in exchange for a book publishing deal. Victoria didn't do that. She's a writer.
He didn't mince words, and I appreciated that.
Victoria, you ended up as a newspaper columnist yourself. Now that must have been remarkably surprising. You went to the New York Post. How did that feel when your father's on the front page and they're calling him the Teflon Don, and here you are now, you're a columnist yourself? Do you think people said, how the hell did you end up there?
It was going to be quite a feat. I knew that. I knew that going. I went to speak to my dad, and he just looked at me, and he said to me, everything you've wanted to do, you've come to me. Some I've agreed with, some I haven't. He said, but I tried to guide you the best I could, and he said, do I think you can do it? Yeah, I think you can do anything. And he said, when you first came to me and said you were writing a book, I had written my first novel at that point, too, after the medical text that I did, which was more of a charitable, it was something that I felt women out there should know because I didn't know what was happening to me. And then suddenly all this stuff, surgeries and things and medications and, defibrillators and pacemakers, and I didn't know what was happening. So I felt a lot of women should know. Then, like I said, when I wrote my first book, I ran it by Dad. I had him read it, and I was waiting with bated breath for his reaction, and he just said to me, I remember that day, he looked at me a couple of weeks later, and he said, well, now let's get to the book. I enjoyed it. He said, but I just wish, I'll never forget this quote. He said, I just wish you would write about women's things, like chicklet is what he meant, not the deep, legal thrillers or dramas. And he said, I think you'll handle yourself well out there. And you will be, put to the test. I can tell you that. He said, but if anybody can overcome that, it'll be you. And he said, you have my blessings. And I was really flattered because he always told me the truth. If it was no good, he said to me, well, give it another try,
Wow,
but
that's
he enjoyed
tremendous.
it. Yeah, he enjoyed it. And I remembered sending him your dad's article in Esquire, and he was impressed. And he wrote me back a letter. Um, Usually he would wait for the visits and we'd discuss them at great lengths, but he wrote me a letter. He must have written it just days after, but you know how that went. It went, every letter you sent and got went rerouted to, from let's say New York to Washington, Washington to wherever, where they'd cut all the, no, they think they're codes and this and that. It was hysterical. My son's birthday would be a code, you know, or and you get a letter, you'd open it up and there'd be all like holes in it, you know, things missing, and you're like, oh my God, really? Are they kidding? And not only would they open, but read and go through everything with a fine print comb, you know, like really.
Oh, they were editing
So,
your father. You know what he would have told them? Why don't you go?
I'm sure he did plenty of time. Yeah, but I know he did compliment your dad's article, and he said to me, "Thank you for sending me the entire magazine." He said, "Unfortunately," he said, "these I won't repeat what he wrote, but he said these, you know, what's up here." He said, "Cut out most of the, you know, like they took off certain. I guess they only sent the cover and the inside article." He said, "I would have liked to have seen the entire magazine." So, but I did get to read the article, and he said, you know, Jimmy's a good guy. He always was a neighborhood, you know, good guy, and that was he was happy with that. He was. He thought that was very complimentary, I guess, from a parent to their child. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. You see, you didn't go to journalism school. Well, you said you went somewhere in college. My father finished a full 5 years, he said, required in high school before he became a writer. But he said about you, it's always Barnard or Princeton or Vassar or Radcliffe. But Victoria
Right.
Gotti took the Q23 bus from Howard Beach to Stella Maris High School in Rockaway, Queens. After Stella Maris, she went to St. John's University. Then she began writing when she was suffering with a heart problem. He said, you said your mother always told you to sit down and write, and that's what you did, and you started to write about what you knew.
Yes, and it was cathartic. It was cleansing. It made me feel a little better. You know, back then they didn't really know much on things, and all I heard were terms like cardiomyopathy. You know, 40% of her heart, you know, has been damaged, the heart wall, and things like that. You know, we'll put her on these meds and rhythm regulators and ACE inhibitors, and we'll put her on stuff that'll make the contractions stronger. So I didn't really understand. I was young. I was in my teens, and I was late teens, and I was just following directions until I just sat down one day and said, you know what? I'd like to know what it is that I have. I'm hearing terms like VTAC, ventricular sudden death. I'm watching baseball players die on the court, you know, just like that, drop, and nobody can help them. That's it. Goodbye, gone. You know, their hearts went chaotic, and they had the same thing. It just became so cumbersome. But I had great doctors, and I sat down one day and I explained it all, I think, to a lot of people, namely one young girl that had gotten the cardiomyopathy after pregnancy and didn't know it. And she unfortunately needed a heart transplant. It had gotten that bad. So she sought me out and to the American Heart Association, and they thought maybe I could help her. So in doing so, I spent a lot of time with her, and then I thought, you know what? This is one person, and I changed her life. And by the way, she did get the heart transplant. She's doing beautifully. She had another baby. Great for her. I just felt I should educate women, and I did. And then from there, I just started writing and writing and writing, and there went, you know.
Look, you wrote big books. You had a television series. You were the premier gossip columnist in New York. Was it hard writing gossip when people were gossiping about you when you were more famous in many ways than they were, Victoria? I mean, everybody want to say, "What's Gotti doing? What's Gotti doing?" She's tied in with everything. They know everything. Did you find it hard or easy? Did people trust you?
I think to me too much because, I would get the stuff that no one else would get, like sex tapes. And I could name a list of people. You would be shocked. You would be shocked. And for some reason, their significant other or whoever did that to them, the other person that got their hands on it, always sent this stuff to me, and I never knew why. And I would never print it. I wouldn't even go, I could have gone to the person next to me. I mean, I was the editor-in-chief at large, but still I could have gone to one of the reporters and said, here's a great story and a feature for the cover story. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And I would take that same damaging information or tape or photos or letters, calls, whatever, and I would call that celebrity's press rep, and I would just hand it over and say, here, I don't want anything more with it, to do with this, but you all handle this the way you see fit, but I can tell you this, from being on the other side, meaning writing and being in journalism, I can tell you this. When they see after a certain point I don't answer them, I don't print it, I don't run it, someone will. So get on it. And then they would jump on it and do what they had to do and thank me profusely, but that was the way I did my things. I just didn't see the glory in destroying someone's life. I just didn't.
They never said, here, Victoria, here's 5 million. Let's have the tell-all. Let's have the Godfather part.
Oh, I got so many offers. Weinstein once. Oh, God, when I remembered watching the beginning of this whole mess with him, and it took me back to a lunch, and I remembered that day my agent said, we're having lunch with a bunch of, influential people and very interested in you, and I was under a 3-book contract deal then with Random House, and took me to this meeting, and I remembered meeting, Harvey Weinstein was, I guess, the real main guy that put it together. And I later learned that there were millions on the table, and he said something like, I'd love the rights to the book, the book. He said, and then I'll buy the movie rights to back that up. I'll put millions, in your pocket, and we can together, blah, blah, blah. And I remembered hearing the beginning sentence and then just tuning him out, and all I saw was his mouth moving. I didn't even hear him anymore. Basically like after the how are yous and nice to meet you, pleasure, oh my goodness, and the shakiness, everybody was like who I was, and that always made me uncomfortable that they would feel that way. But once you get past that and they see you're a regular person, then comes the usual typical line, oh my God, you really are a funny, down-to-earth person. And I would stare at them and say to myself in my head without saying out loud, I don't know if that's a compliment, if I should take that as a compliment or an insult, but I'm just going to go with it, and let them, if they have ignorance in them, whatever, if they meant malice, I don't know, compliments, I don't know, and I don't care. So we'd move on, and I remembered looking at my agent, I think we were 10 minutes into the meeting, and I said, I gave him that look like, why are we here? And then he got up to go to the bathroom, used the men's room, and I got up behind him, and I said, excuse me, gentlemen, I said, Frank, while you're going, you could show me where it is. I didn't have to use the ladies' room, but I went behind him, I grabbed him near the bathroom. We were in the Tribeca Grill, and I said to him, what is this about? And he said, he's going to make you an offer. He said, I didn't want to tell you till we got here. I knew your answer. He said, but I just want you to hear him out. That's all. It's an interesting offer, and I think it's something that we should at least talk about. And I just looked at him, and I went, I can't believe he did this. I can't believe he did this. You and I will deal with this later. And I went back to the table. I was back within minutes, and I sat down. He came behind me, and that's when my agent then said to Harvey, all right, well, I guess we can get down to business. And Harvey said, I'm sure you're aware, or maybe you're not. And he looked at my agent. I don't know if it was a two. I don't know. I really don't know to this day if it was kind of planned that way or someone feigned. He looked me dead in the eye and said, I want the book. He said, and I know you're under book contract with Random House and your novels and even a cookbook they want to throw in for the 4th. And he said, I can do all of that. I can make you the next biggest best-selling, novelist. He said, but I'm interested in the book, and I'd love to buy then the movie rights, of course. He said, it would be a fat paycheck. He said, we're talking in the millions. And I just remember staring at him, and like I said, the rest of his words didn't even. And then I waited. I let them all talk. They were laughing and going back and forth, and then finally someone looked at me. I think it was my agent, and it was my turn then to, I guess, speak. And I just, before standing up, I put my napkin on the table, and I said, look, gentlemen, it's been nice to meet all of you. Oh, you know what? I remember now. It was seeing Bob De Niro come out of the elevator. And we were sitting at a table close to the elevator, and I saw him. And Bob has always given me really good advice. And I don't know, I snapped back to like, this is not, I'm done. I'm ended here, and I'm not being polite anymore. And I just stood up, and I said to all of them, I'm sorry if I wasted your time. I'm really not interested. I don't even know why I'm here. And I looked at my agent, and I said, but we'll discuss that later. And I said to Weinstein, I said, thanks, but no thanks. And the rest of the men, I have no clue who they even were. They were just kind of there as, I called them seat fillers. And I got up, I said goodbye to all, and left. My car was outside. I pulled off. I wouldn't take my agent's calls for a few days, and then we kind of got back on track. But I said to him, don't ever, ever do that to me again. You know me. You know my personality. You know the line not to cross, and you crossed it. You crossed it. Carl had offered me a starring role in Analyze That, the Part 2 one, Patty, and they're telling me it's a couple of scenes, and they ran the script over to me at the Post, a couple of scenes. It was like the pink pages, they called them, and I was like, wait a minute, she's in every scene. I said, are they kidding me? And I thanked them, but no thank, it was just not meant for me.
Why? Do you think everybody was just trying to cash in on your father and they didn't respect your talent? Did that piss you off?
No, in De Niro's case, I think it was good PR thinking on the others that were involved. And he had seen me, I think, do an interview with Pamela Anderson and Kid Rock on Extra the night before. And he was very intrigued. So he had called someone who called the casting agent who called me at the Post, and I hung up on it 3 times thinking it was a fake call, Finally, she ran the script over with a messenger, and I looked up at my desk, and he just put it down, and he said, thank you very much. This is from, can you sign for it? And he walked out, and I'm sifting through it, and I'm going, okay, this is real? Like, I couldn't believe it, and the woman called me back, and she said to me, did you get the script? Obviously, we know that you did, and I said, yes, and she said, is there any way you would come in and read with Bob and Billy Crystal? And I said, you know what? It was a Friday. I'll never forget that. And I said to her, can I call you back Monday? I just wanted to get out of there and get off the phone. But thinking it over, it wasn't something that was for me. I think that they just thought it was a comedy. And I think that they thought this would be really great, PR, kind of, let's really get out there running. That kind of a situation. So I just didn't think it was for me, though.
No, but you were working in a newspaper. I mean, you must have felt proud having your own byline, Victoria Gotti. I mean, that's a hard thing to get. You earned it.
Yeah, and I enjoyed that. I have to say it was really great until they got a new editor in, and I remembered my old, editor, Marilyn. She was a doll. She was great, and everything was working. And, when it's not broke, you don't fix it. But this new, I don't know, her contract was up, and they didn't renew it, and they got this other woman in, young woman, and she called me in her office one day and said, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I feel that your talents are not being as used as they should be, meaning she said we can up the ante 5 times. Like use me, I'm not stupid, like use me to go in to all the, the things that they couldn't normally get to or the reaches that they couldn't, reach. I just didn't listen to her, and I said, well, I'm happy where I am and what I'm doing. And she said, no, I want to put you like really up front. We want you to do the features and really heavy duty stuff. And I knew what that meant, and I just looked at her and I said, I don't feel comfortable with this conversation.
What do you mean you knew what it meant? Because an audience doesn't know what you mean by that.
She wanted me to do and work on the cover stories. Now, a lot of the cover stories were my dad. Okay, so
And your dad was John Gotti, the biggest mafia boss in the United States of America and the most famous. And
right.
It must have been hard for you. It's your father, and now you're being asked to write about your father. I've never heard of this situation, to be frank with you, in journalism. Oh, boy.
Exactly.
This episode of Breslin's What's Doing is brought to you by Medford Fast Lube. Put your car in good hands. With more than 25 years of experience, the experts at Medford Fast Lube will care for your vehicle like it's our own without breaking the bank. Take the stress out of the unexpected. If your car needs repair, it can be expensive as well as stressful. Take some of that weight off your shoulders with free estimates from the experts at Medford Fast Lube. Our friendly staff is here to help. Located at Route 112 in Medford, New York. www.medfordfastlube.com or dial 631-475-2107. Medford Fast Lube. Advisor Insurance Group. Advisor Insurance resource experts in life, disability, long-term care, business, home, and auto insurance across the U.S. With over 60 insurance companies offered and over 30 years of combined experience, Advisor Insurance Resource simply can't be beat. Call 866-942-4181 or on the web at advisorinsurancresource.com. Bamonte's. Bamonte's at 32 Withers Street, Brooklyn, New York, is a family-owned and operated Italian-American restaurant that has been in business since 1900. It is the oldest Italian restaurant in Brooklyn and one of the oldest in New York City. Once again, try our delicious food at 32 Withers Street, Brooklyn, or call 718-384-8831. Bamonte's.
So I will tell you this: when he got really sick, and the prison didn't even have the audacity, they didn't even have the class, I should say, to call any of us. And I had my kid brother living out there because he was the only one at the time that didn't have children. And we had him living, we rented a house for him so he could be right near there, 10 minutes away should anything happen. And because I had walked in the month before and I saw a scene that I can never forget in my life, and I will never forget. And there is cruelty, and then there is just, they put my dad in what they called a medically induced coma, and, he was kind of in and out, and he could no longer speak, and he had a blackboard and chalk on the wall, and he could really even barely reach for that, but he would just kind of, when he was awake for a minute or two, he would lean over and write, one-word things, and I'd know. And anyway, I remembered they let me in this room, and they, it was no more the regular visiting room where, the plexiglass and the cages that we were in, but they led me down this long hallway and in the basement and all the way down the end of the hall, and I was like, where the hell are we? Like, this is like a horror movie. And then the CO opened the gate, and I went through this door, and when he opened the door, I was shocked. The room was probably 8 feet by 5 feet in width, and there was Dad on a bed to my right, and he was, like I said, comatose, pretty much. And there was a whole tripod camera set up at the foot of his bed. And it was on him 24/7, and you saw the red light just keep going, 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 going. And I looked up at the CO, and I said to him, "Are you guys serious? I mean, are you really serious? You're filming him dying? You are filming him 24/7. Do you think that he's going to get up 1 minute and just what? Break through your iron doors, and you steal cars and all that, and what? Make an escape for it in his condition, but you're filming it all too and taking his dignity away from him? What is wrong with you people?" And the guy just hung his head low, and he whispered under his breath, and he said, "Look, I'm a huge fan of your dad's. I only do what the guy upstairs tells me." The warden was a really, real piece of, oh, God, he was a piece of work, let me tell you.
My father didn't like him. He told me one day they got Gotti there, and where was it, in Kansas, in a basement. He told me, living in some
No, one guy, it was a prank. And some crazy guy and they used to get them all the time. Some crazy guy sent this letter to the warden saying, "Your life's in danger," or something threatening. And they took every single Gotti, my father mostly, but every Gotti, anybody that knew anybody, and locked everybody down for 90 days in the hole, and nobody knew why they were even there. All because he claimed he got this letter, one of like 1,000, or thousands, I should say, but he decided to take that seriously. And he made a grandstand of it, and that was that. And like I said, when my father died, I remembered I was just vacuuming, literally, in my living room, and I happen to look up at the TV. I couldn't hear the volume, and I see the ticker tape running on the bottom, and it says, "Not confirmed yet, but John Gotti has passed away, blah, blah, blah." And I just froze. I remembered I dropped everything, and I just dropped to the floor, and I was like, no, and no. My brother is out there. He would know. I would have gotten a call. This is another one of their crank, jump to the whatever. And I dialed my brother, and I had to dial him 3 times. I was getting the number wrong, and then I finally got him, and I said, "Peter, where's Daddy?" And then he went, "What do you mean, Vic? What's the matter?" And I said, "They're saying Daddy passed." And he went, "What?" And he was shocked, too. And I said, "You don't know anything about this?" And he said, "No wonder why they turned me away this morning for a visit at 9:30. They turned me away." And I said, "They what?" And he said, "Yes, my regular visiting day with him." He said, "They turned me away." And then we hung up. He ran to do whatever. Leona Helmsley, God bless her soul, stepped in. She sent me her private plane and said, "Just go out there and you get my man. You get the prince of our city, and you bring him back home." And we did. And we did.
It was disgusting what they did to your father, in case you want.
Oh, it was crazy.
He told me the feds were disgusting.
I have to say, with my dad, he protected us and always shielded us from all of that. So, we weren't really affected in certain ways, but when they came to my home from my ex-husband, the evil that they can step to, I got to tell you, unless you were there, you would never believe me. You would never believe me, and I let them in because my ex-husband, my then husband said, let them in. They have to do a, look-see at the setup of the house and whatever. And I think he was going to bail or whatever it was. And one of them came in, and I remember he was staring at. I ignored them. I just went about my business, made myself a cup of tea, and I was in the kitchen just making sure I knew where everybody was. And there were about 3 or 4 of them, and this one guy with a trench coat, he was staring out of the kitchen back door, and he just said over his shoulders, "We're paisans." And I just said something like, "What?" And he said, "We're paisans, my last name is Scalar, and your last. And I just looked at him and I went, "You're not my paisan. Trust me." And then I just took my tea. I went on the other side, and he came over to me, and he went to hand me an envelope. And he said, "Here, would you like to see these transcripts and read them and some pictures and the this and the that?" And I just looked at him, and I went, "You know what? Just when I was thinking the movie's over-exaggerated how low you guys really can go, you just proved to me that they don't even have the tip of the iceberg. What you just did." I said, "No, you keep them. And you paste them on your walls. Read them at night when you can't sleep." And I made them all leave, and that was it. I locked the door. But I saw it myself, and that
Now
is
I
how
know
they
why
are.
my father loved you. Oh, now I know why my father loved you. Oh boy. He used to tell me when cops come into your house, hello is one word too many. You decided, then you wrote the big book about being the daughter.
Well, like I said, I wrote the book because my family asked me to do that.
You got to write what you know, Victoria.
That was not even a tip of the iceberg. But my family begged me, and it was something I swore to myself I would never do. I don't even know why I gave in. I think it was just one night I was tossing and turning, and I thought my brother would do that and then some for me. And the next day I called my mom and I said, "Okay." And I think I finished it in 29 days.
That's what I said. You're unique. I don't know anybody that would sit in a chair in a news office, which is a very competitive place. And most of the people, I think, are just bitter with jealousy, trying hopefully that they can even write something that will be read. And here you are, everyone's reading you, and you're front page news yourself. I mean, Victoria,
Right.
you were in a unique situation. And I mean, I really admire you because I know personally how probably difficult that must have been for you. And I know you're tough as
It was
nails,
tough.
but not easy, right?
It was
Can't be.
tough, but you know what? I looked at it this way. Like, I was proud of what I was doing. I didn't have one career, like for 3 years and then another for four and another. I had three full careers going at one time. I don't know many women that could say that. So one night when I was so tired and I got home, and I think I was so tired I couldn't even eat. And I just remembered my oldest son coming in to me and saying, "Mom, you're working just too hard, too many hours, you're gone too long, crazy." And they were old enough to be on their own, but he said to me, "It's just crazy." And I said to him, "You know what, though, son? In other words, it's not really getting to me." And he said, "Well, we're real proud of you." That did it for me.
You're a bionic woman almost with your health issues. Let me ask you, when you first got your press pass, it said New York Working Press, Victoria Gotti. How did that make you feel?
Oh, that was, and then the same day I got my press pass. I got my parking, you get those parking things that you put in the windshield. I got my stationary letterhead, the cards. I felt like, wow, wow. And to see it on the card, say, New York Post with their logo and Victoria Gotti, columnist, it just was, it was a thrill. It was a thrill.
Well, Victoria, what you're
It.
talking to me about here was absolutely special. And the reason I reached out to you was because my father saw it when he said that girl taking the Q21 bus can write. God bless you. And a small anecdote, my mother and your father are at the same cemetery in Queens, St. John's. So we say prayers.
Thank you.